there is a specific quality to the silence that follows an insult in a boardroom. It is not the silence of shock, nor is it the silence of agreement. It is the silence of calculation. It is the sound of 30 people holding their breath while one person decides whether to laugh, to cry, or to burn the building down. I chose none of those. I chose to watch. I watched Richard Sterling lean back in his Herman Miller chair, the leather creaking under the weight of his own arrogance, and I watched the smirk settle into the lines around his mouth. He had just finished speaking. He had just finished dismantling 5 years of my labor with a single joke about the university on my diploma. He called it a diploma mill. He called it a participation trophy. He said it was nice that I had something to frame while the real adults handled the real numbers. The room was cold, kept at the standard corporate 68 degrees that preserves equipment and suppresses blood flow, but I felt a heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with temperature. It was not anger. Anger is hot, messy, and inefficient. Anger makes you scream. Anger makes you quit. Anger makes you visible. What I felt was colder. It was a crystallization. It was the moment the water turns to ice, sharp and clear and capable of cutting. I did not look down at my notebook. I did not fidget with my pen. I kept my eyes on Richard, and I let my face remain neutral, a mask of professional compliance that I had perfected over a decade of navigating spaces where women were tolerated but not respected. I nodded, just once, a slight dip of the chin that acknowledged his authority without validating his insult. Then I opened my folder and turned to the next page of the quarterly report as if he had commented on the weather. Inside, however, the mechanism had engaged. The gears that I had kept oiled and ready began to turn. He thought he was speaking to an employee. He thought he was speaking to a subordinate. He did not know he was speaking to a creditor. He did not know that the merger papers sitting on the table, the ones he was so eager to sign to secure his legacy and his golden parachute, were already written in a language he could not read. He thought the ink was dry. He did not know I held the pen. My name is Nadia. I am 37 years old. I have spent the last 12 years climbing the corporate ladder of Sterling Dynamics, a mid-sized logistics firm based in Chicago that pretends it is a global powerhouse. I started in data entry. I moved to analysis. I became the director of operations. I know where every body is buried in this company because I am the one who dug the holes. I know which contracts are inflated. I know which clients are bleeding money. I know which vendors are owned by the CEO's brother-in-law. I know this because it is my job to know. Competence is often invisible until it is absent. When the servers go down, people notice. When the supply chain breaks, people notice. But when the system runs smoothly, when the margins are protected, when the compliance audits come back clean, people assume it is magic. They assume it is luck. They do not see the hands on the keyboard. They do not see the hours spent reviewing legal briefs at midnight. They do not see the degree I earned while working full-time, the Master of Business Administration from a state university that Richard Sterling deemed unworthy of his heir. He went to Wharton. He wears his pedigree like a shield, believing it makes him immune to consequence. He believes that because his father went to Wharton and his father before him, the world owes him a certain level of deference. He believes that people like me, people who had to work for every credential, are merely support staff for his genius. This is a common delusion among men of his station. They confuse lineage with ability. They confuse noise with signal. And it is this delusion that creates the opening. It creates the blind spot. If he had respected me, he would have watched me. He would have monitored my movements. He would have questioned my access. But because he dismissed me, because he categorized me as harmless, I became invisible. And in the world of corporate law and high-stakes finance, invisibility is the greatest weapon of all. The meeting where he mocked me was a Tuesday. It was the weekly executive sync, the place where the leadership team gathers to pretend they are steering the ship while the actual crew keeps it afloat. There were 8 of us around the table. The CFO, a man named David who looks at his shoes when Richard speaks. The head of sales, a woman named Alina who smiles too much to hide her fear. The legal counsel, Marcus, who is competent but cautious. And then there was me, Nadia, the operational backbone. Richard was discussing the upcoming merger with Apex Global. It was the deal of the decade, or so he claimed. Apex was a larger conglomerate looking to absorb Sterling Dynamics to expand their Midwest footprint. For Richard, this was the exit strategy. This was the payday that would allow him to retire to a vineyard in Napa and write memoirs about leadership. For the employees, it was a question mark. Mergers usually mean layoffs. They mean restructuring. They mean uncertainty. But Richard sold it as growth. He sold it as evolution. He stood at the head of the table, pointing at the projection screen with a laser pointer that shook slightly in his hand. He talked about synergy. He talked about market share. He talked about the future. And then, when the conversation turned to the qualifications of the team managing the integration, he looked at me. He needed a scapegoat for a minor delay in the data migration. Instead of taking responsibility for the resource allocation, he decided to undermine my authority. He said, and I quote, that perhaps if we had someone with a rigorous academic background leading this, we wouldn't be struggling with the basics. He looked at my file on the table. He tapped it with a manicured finger. He said he hoped my degree program included a module on actual finance, not just theory. The room went quiet. David looked at his notepad. Elena looked at the window. Marcus looked at his phone. They waited to see if I would defend myself. They waited to see if I would break. I did not. I simply said, I will have the revised timeline on your desk by end of day. And I meant it. I would have the timeline. But I would also have something else. I would have the leverage. I walked back to my office after the meeting. My office is on the same floor as Richard's, but down the hall, past the receptionist who knows everyone's secrets. The carpet is a dull gray, designed to hide stains. The walls are glass, designed to make us feel transparent. I sat at my desk and I did not cry. I did not call my husband. I did not call my mother. I opened my bottom drawer and I took out the external hard drive that I keep locked away. This drive contains everything. It contains the emails Richard sent when he was drunk. It contains the invoices he approved for consulting firms that do not exist. It contains the records of the board meetings where he lied about the company's debt load. But more importantly, it contains the structure of the merger itself. Most people think a merger is a handshake between two CEOs. They think it is a press release and a champagne toast. It is not. It is a labyrinth of legal entities, holding companies, equity swaps, and vesting schedules. It is a machine built of paper and law, and like any machine, it has vulnerabilities. It has pressure points. If you know where to push, the whole thing can shift. Richard believed he was selling the company to Apex Global. He believed he was the seller. He believed he was the one setting the terms. He was wrong. 6 months prior, during the initial due diligence phase, I had noticed a discrepancy in the valuation models. The company was undervalued. Not by a little, by enough to change the entire nature of the transaction. I brought this to Richard's attention. He dismissed it. He said the board had already approved the baseline. He said not to worry about the details. He said my job was execution, not strategy, so I executed, but I executed a different plan. I began to acquire, not openly, not in my name. I used a shell entity, a limited liability company registered in Delaware, managed by a trusted fiduciary who asked no questions as long as the fees were paid. I began buying shares of Sterling Dynamics on the open market whenever the price dipped. I bought the shares that the early investors were dumping because they lacked confidence in Richard's leadership. I bought the shares that the employees were selling because they were afraid of the merger. I accumulated quietly, steadily, until I held a significant block of equity. Not enough to control the board on my own, but enough to matter. Enough to be a key holder. And then I went further. I negotiated with Apex Global directly, not as an employee of Sterling, as a representative of the shareholder coalition. They knew who I was. They knew what I knew. They knew that Richard was a liability. They wanted the assets, not the man, so we drafted a contingency. We drafted a clause that would activate upon specific triggers. Triggers related to misrepresentation of assets. Triggers related to leadership competence. Triggers that Richard was actively building for me every day he stayed in power. The weeks following the board meeting were a study in discipline. I had to act exactly as I always had. I had to be the reliable Nadia. I had to bring him coffee when he asked. I had to summarize the reports he was too lazy to read. I had to smile when he made jokes that were not funny. I had to absorb the microaggressions without flinching. This is the hardest part of revenge. It is not the strike. It is the weight. It is the ability to look someone in the eye who has wronged you and treat them with the courtesy they do not deserve. It requires a level of emotional detachment that most people do not possess. They want to lash out. They want to show their hand. They want the satisfaction of the confrontation. But satisfaction is fleeting. Consequences are permanent. I needed permanent, so I worked late. I stayed in the office until the cleaning crew arrived. I reviewed the merger agreements line by line. I looked for the definitions. I looked for the contingencies. I found one in Section 14, Paragraph 3. It stated that in the event of a material change in the leadership structure or a discovery of material misrepresentation prior to closing, the acquisition terms could be renegotiated by the majority shareholders. Material misrepresentation. That was the key. Richard had told the board that the company's debt was manageable. He had told Apex that the client retention rate was 90%. Both were lies. The debt was hidden in subsidiary accounts. The retention rate was 60% and falling. I had the proofs. I had the bank statements. I had the client churn reports that he had ordered me to suppress. I compiled them. I organized them. I created a dossier that was not just evidence of incompetence, but evidence of fraud. And I waited for the right moment to deploy it. The moment was the signing ceremony. It was scheduled for a Friday, a classic choice. No one wants to deal with bad news on a Friday. It ruins the weekend. Richard planned to make a spectacle of it. He invited the press. He invited the local chamber of commerce. He rented a venue at a downtown hotel that cost more than my annual salary. He wanted to be seen. He wanted the photo op. He wanted the headline. He did not know that the headline would be written by me. In the days leading up to the signing, the atmosphere in the office was electric. People were nervous. Rumors were flying. Would there be layoffs? Would the brand change? Would we all be fired on Monday? I walked through the floors and I listened. I heard the fear. I heard the resentment. I heard people talking about Richard behind his back. They called him out of touch. They called him greedy. They did not know I was listening. They did not know I was cataloging their sentiments. Because this was not just about me. This was about the ecosystem. Richard was a toxin. He drained morale. He drained resources. He drained hope. Removing him was not just an act of personal vengeance. It was an act of hygiene. It was necessary for the health of the organism. I began to schedule meetings with the board members individually. I did not tell them why. I just said I needed to discuss the merger integration plan. They agreed. They respected my operational knowledge. They trusted my data. I sat in their offices in their high-backed chairs and I presented them with facts. I did not present emotions. I did not talk about how Richard mocked me. I talked about the risk. I showed them the debt models. I showed them the client churn. I showed them the legal exposure. I asked them a simple question. If this goes wrong, who is liable? Is it the company? Or is it the board that approved the false statements? I saw the color drain from their faces. I saw the calculation begin in their eyes. They were wealthy men and women. They did not want to go to jail. They did not want to be sued. They wanted to protect their assets. I offered them a way out. I told them that there was a mechanism to restructure the deal. A mechanism that would protect them while removing the liability. I told them that the shareholders had concerns. I did not say I was the shareholder. I let them assume it was a group. I let them imagine a coalition. The human mind fills in gaps with its own fears. They imagined a revolt. They imagined a lawsuit. They imagined the SEC knocking on their doors. I did not have to threaten them. I just had to show them the cliff. They would jump on their own. The night before the signing, I did not sleep. I sat in my living room and I reviewed the documents one last time. The merger papers were final. The copies were printed. The pens were bought. The champagne was chilled. Everything was ready for the coronation of Richard Sterling. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired. There were lines around my eyes that had not been there a year ago. This work costs something. It takes a piece of you. It requires you to harden parts of your soul that should remain soft, but I told myself it was worth it. I told myself that once this was over, I could soften again. I could breathe. I could be just Nadia again, not the avenger, not the strategist, just a woman who did her job well. I packed my bag. I put on the suit I had bought specifically for this day. It was navy blue, sharp, tailored. It was armor. I checked my phone. I had a message from the legal counsel of Apex Global. They were ready. They were waiting for my signal. They knew that Richard was a risk. They knew that if he signed the deal as it stood, and the fraud was revealed later, the deal would collapse and they would sue for damages. They preferred a clean house. They preferred a leadership team that understood the value of truth. I was that leadership team. I was the bridge. I was the guarantee. I closed my eyes and I visualized the sequence of events. I visualized Richard standing at the podium. I visualized him speaking. I visualized the moment I would stand up. I visualized the look on his face. It was not a fantasy of joy. It was a simulation of logistics. I was checking for errors. I was checking for variables. I was ensuring that the equation balanced. Because in the end, revenge is just math. It is input and output. It is cause and effect. If you do X, Y must happen. If you steal credit, you must lose status. If you humiliate, you must be humbled. The universe seeks equilibrium. I was just the agent of balance. Friday morning arrived with a gray sky and a light rain. Chicago in the autumn is a melancholy place, the sky pressing down on the skyscrapers like a lid. I arrived at the hotel an hour early. The ballroom was being set up. Flowers were being arranged. The podium was being tested for microphone feedback. I walked to the back of the room and I stood in the shadows. I watched the staff scurry around. I watched the journalists plug in their cameras. I watched the board members arrive, looking nervous in their suits. They saw me. They nodded. They did not speak. The silence between us was heavy with understanding. They knew something was going to happen. They did not know what. They only knew that I had told them to be ready to vote if called upon. Richard arrived 20 minutes before the start. He swept into the room like a storm front. He was wearing a tuxedo, which was excessive for a business signing, but he loved the theater. He shook hands. He slapped backs. He laughed too loud. He did not look at me. He assumed I was in the back, taking notes, managing the logistics. He assumed I was part of the scenery. He walked up to the stage and he tested the microphone. He told a joke to the sound engineer. He looked comfortable. He looked safe. That was his mistake. Safety is an illusion. It is a construct built on the assumption that nothing will change, but everything changes. The ground shifts. The tectonic plates move. And sometimes, the person holding the map is the one who drew the fault lines. I checked my watch. It was time. I walked to the front of the room. I did not go to the side where the staff was standing. I went to the center. I went to the table where the documents were laid out. Richard saw me. He frowned. He signaled to the event coordinator to remove me. The coordinator hesitated. She looked at me. I shook my head slightly. She stayed put. Richard leaned into the microphone. He said, "Nadia, please return to your station. We are about to begin." I looked at him. I looked at the audience. I looked at the cameras. I said, "We are not beginning. Not yet. There is a procedural matter that must be addressed before any signatures are affixed." Richard laughed. He thought it was a joke. He thought I was trying to delay the process to make myself feel important. He said, "This is not the time for operations updates. This is a celebration." I said, "It is not a celebration. It is a transaction." And the terms have changed. The room went silent, the same silence from the boardroom, but this time it was different. This time it was the silence of a precipice. Richard's smile faded. He stepped down from the podium. He walked toward me. He lowered his voice. He said, "What are you doing? You are embarrassing yourself. Go to your office." I said, "I am not an employee right now, Richard. I am a representative of the majority shareholder block." I placed a folder on the table. It was thick. It was sealed. I opened it. I pulled out the first page. I held it up so the cameras could see. It was a notice of intent to renegotiate based on material discrepancy. I said, according to Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the merger agreement, if there is evidence of material misrepresentation regarding asset valuation or leadership competency, the shareholders have the right to halt the closing and demand a review. Richard's face went pale. He said, "That is nonsense. There is no misrepresentation." I said, "There is, and I have the proof." I turned to the board members. I said, "You all received the dossier I sent last night. You know the debt is not $3 million. It is 12. You know the client retention is not 90%. It is 60. You know that Richard has been using company funds to pay for personal legal fees. You know this because I gave you the bank records. I saw them shift in their seats. I saw them look at Richard. The alliance was breaking. The loyalty was evaporating. Richard looked at them. He said, "This is a lie. She is disgruntled. She is angry because I criticized her work." I said, "I am not angry. I am accurate. Anger clouds judgment. I am very clear." I turned to the representatives from Apex Global. They were sitting in the front row. They stood up. The lead counsel walked to the table. He looked at Richard. He said, "Mr. Sterling, if these claims are true, we cannot proceed. Our due diligence team flagged some of these discrepancies last week. We waited for your disclosure. You did not disclose." Richard stammered. He said, "It is a misunderstanding. It is an accounting error." I said, "It is fraud. And if you sign this paper today, you are signing a confession." I picked up the pen that was sitting on the table. It was a heavy gold pen, engraved with the company logo. I held it in my hand. I looked at Richard. I said, "You mocked my degree. You said I did not understand finance. You said I was not a real adult. You were wrong. I understand finance better than you. I understand law better than you. And I understand power better than you. Power is not about title. It is about leverage. And today, I hold all the leverage." Richard looked around the room. He looked for support. He looked for an ally. There was none. The board members were looking at their phones, likely emailing their lawyers. The journalists were typing furiously. The Apex team was packing their bags. They were not signing. The deal was dead. Or rather, the deal was changing. It was no longer a merger with Richard at the helm. It was an acquisition of assets with a new management structure. I placed the pen down. I said, "The merger is suspended pending an independent audit. Richard, you are placed on administrative leave effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. You will surrender your key cards and your company devices." Richard stood there. He looked small. The tuxedo did not fit him anymore. The arrogance had drained out of him, leaving only the hollow shell of a man who had been caught. He said, "You cannot do this. I am the CEO." I said, "You were the CEO. Now you are a liability." I nodded to the security guards who had been standing by the doors. They had been briefed. They stepped forward. They did not touch him. They did not need to. The shame was enough. The public humiliation was enough. He walked out of the room. He did not look back. He walked through the press, through the flowers, through the wreckage of his own making. The doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. The tension broke. The board chairman stood up. He looked at me. He said, "What happens now?" I said, "Now we fix it. Now we tell the truth. Now we save the company." I turned to the Apex team. I said, "The offer still stands, but the terms are different. No golden parachute for the executive team. No retention bonuses for the liable parties. And the new COO position goes to me." The Apex counsel smiled. He said, "We expected nothing less." They sat back down. The signing resumed. But this time, the papers were different. This time, the name on the line was not Richard Sterling. It was Nadia. I signed my name. The ink was black. It was permanent. It was the end of one story and the beginning of another. The aftermath was quiet. There was no party. There was no champagne. The staff returned to their desks. The work continued. The only difference was the atmosphere. The fear was gone. The toxicity was gone. People walked the halls with their heads up. They spoke to each other without looking over their shoulders. The audit confirmed everything I had said. The debt was real. The fraud was real. Richard was terminated for cause. He lost his severance. He lost his stock options. He lost his reputation. I heard he is consulting now, doing small gigs for companies that do not check references. I do not follow his career. I do not care. He is irrelevant. He is a footnote in the history of Sterling Dynamics. I am the chapter that follows. I took over the integration. I managed the transition. I protected the employees. I kept the jobs. I stabilized the margins. It was hard work. It was longer hours than I had ever worked. But it was my work. It was done on my terms. I did not have to hide my degree. I did not have to apologize for my background. I hung my diploma on the wall of my new office. It is the first thing you see when you walk in. It is not there to boast. It is there to remind me. It is there to remind me that the paper does not make the person. The work makes the person. The results make the person. Richard thought the world was a hierarchy based on pedigree. He thought he was at the top because of where he went to school. He learned too late that the world is a hierarchy based on value. And value is created by those who do the work, not those who take the credit. In the weeks that followed, I received many congratulations. People told me I was brave. They told me I was inspiring. They told me I was a hero. I did not feel like a hero. A hero acts on impulse. A hero saves the day with a grand gesture. I did not save the day. I managed a risk. I corrected an error. I restored order. There is a difference. Heroism is emotional. Justice is procedural. I prefer justice. I prefer the cold clarity of the law. I prefer the satisfaction of knowing that the rules were followed, that the evidence was solid, that the outcome was inevitable. I do not want to be admired. I want to be respected. I want to be known as the person who gets things done, the person who does not break under pressure, the person who does not let insults dictate their behavior. I want to be known as the person who wins, and I did win. But the victory is not in the title. It is not in the office. It is not in the salary. The victory is in the silence. It is in the quiet moments when I sit at my desk and I know that no one is coming to undermine me. I know that no one is hiding files from me. I know that I am safe. I know that I am in control. That is the only feeling that matters. The rest is noise. There are people who say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Revenge is not a dish. It is a meal you cook for yourself because you are hungry for justice. It is not about serving it to someone else. It is about feeding yourself. It is about nourishing your own sense of worth. When Richard mocked me, he tried to starve me. He tried to make me feel small. He tried to make me feel unworthy. I did not let him. I fed myself. I fed myself with facts. I fed myself with preparation. I fed myself with patience. And when I finally sat down at the table, I was full. I was satisfied. He was the one who was left hungry. He was the one who was left wanting. That is the true reversal. It is not about destroying the enemy. It is about becoming so strong that the enemy cannot touch you. It is about building a fortress that no insult can penetrate. I built that fortress. I built it brick by brick. I built it with every report I filed. I built it with every meeting I attended. I built it with every time I swallowed my pride and worked harder. And now I live in it. It is secure. It is stable. It is mine. I sometimes think about the degree. I think about the nights I spent studying while my friends were out. I think about the money I spent on tuition while I was paying off student loans. I think about the doubt I felt when I wondered if it was worth it. It was worth it. Not for the knowledge. I could have learned the knowledge on my own. It was worth it for the discipline. It was worth it for the proof. It was worth it to have the certificate that said I finished what I started. Richard tried to take that away from me with a joke. He tried to invalidate the effort. He could not. You cannot invalidate effort. You cannot invalidate results. You can only ignore them. And if you ignore them long enough, they become the thing that destroys you. That is what happened to Richard. He ignored the reality of his company. He ignored the reality of his team. He ignored the reality of me, and the reality crushed him. It was not a violent crash. It was a structural failure. The beams gave way, the foundation cracked, and the building fell. I was just the inspector who pointed out the cracks. I did not push the building. I just refused to pretend it was standing. Now, when I walk into a boardroom, the silence is different. It is not the silence of calculation. It is the silence of respect. When I speak, people listen. When I ask for data, people bring it. When I make a decision, people follow it. This is not because I demand it. This is because I have earned it. I have earned it through the fire. I have earned it through the betrayal. I have earned it through the cold, hard work of reclaiming my own narrative. I am not the victim. I am not the survivor. I am the architect. I designed the outcome. I drew the plans. I laid the foundation. And I will continue to build. There will be other Richards. There will be other insults. There will be other attempts to diminish me. Let them come. I am ready. I have the documents. I have the evidence. I have the will. I am not afraid of the silence anymore. I am not afraid of the dark. I am the one who turns on the light. I am the one who reads the contract. I am the one who signs the check. And if anyone tries to tell me otherwise, if anyone tries to tell me I am not enough, I will not argue. I will not scream. I will just work. I will just plan. I will just wait. And when the time comes, I will show them the papers. I will show them my name. And I will watch them realize that they were never the ones in charge. They were just the ones holding the pen until I decided to take it back. The sun is setting now. The office is empty. The city lights are coming on below. Chicago is beautiful at night. It looks like a circuit board. It looks like a machine. I like machines. I like things that work. I like things that make sense. Life is not always logical. People are not always rational, but business is. Business is cause and effect. Business is input and output. If you put in the work, you get the result. If you put in the lies, you get the collapse. I believe in this. I believe in the logic of it. It gives me peace. It gives me purpose. I pack my bag. I turn off the lights. I lock the door. I walk to the elevator. I press the button for the lobby. I watch the numbers go down. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 1. The doors open. I walk out into the night. The air is cool. It smells like rain and concrete. I walk to my car. I get in. I start the engine. I drive home. I do not think about Richard. I do not think about the merger. I think about dinner. I think about my husband. I think about the book I am reading. I think about the weekend. I have earned the right to think about small things. I have earned the right to rest, because the war is over. The battle was won. The territory is secure. I am home, and I am safe. And that is enough. That is more than enough. It is everything. There is a lesson in this. A lesson for anyone who has been told they are not enough. A lesson for anyone who has been mocked for their background. A lesson for anyone who has been underestimated. Do not fight the fire with fire. Do not meet the chaos with chaos. Meet it with order. Meet it with precision. Meet it with the cold, hard truth. Let them speak. Let them boast. Let them build their castles on sand. You build your house on rock. You build it with facts. You build it with law. You build it with patience. And when the storm comes, and it always comes, their castle will wash away. And your house will stand. You will be the one left standing. You will be the one holding the keys. You will be the one writing the future. Do not let them tell you who you are. You tell them, you show them, you prove them. And when you do, do not look for applause. Do not look for praise. Look for the work. Look for the next step. Look for the next goal. Because the victory is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the foundation for what comes next. And what comes next is yours. It belongs to you. No one can take it. No one can mock it. No one can diminish it. It is yours. Take it. Hold it. Keep it. And never let go. I remember the day I got the degree. I remember standing in the arena. I remember the heat. I remember the noise. I remember looking at the stage and thinking I made it. I did not think about the job. I did not think about the money. I thought about the pride. I thought about the fact that I had done it. No one gave it to me. I took it. I earned it. Richard tried to tell me it was worthless. He was wrong. It was the most valuable thing I had. It was the proof of my persistence. It was the symbol of my refusal to quit. And today, it is the symbol of my victory. It hangs on the wall. It catches the light. It shines. It reminds me that I am capable. It reminds me that I am strong. It reminds me that I am Nadia. And that is the only name that matters. The rest is just noise. The rest is just history. The rest is just the past. I am the present. I am the future, and I am just getting started. The merger was only the beginning. There are other companies. There are other deals. There are other injustices to correct. I am ready for them. I am prepared for them. I am not afraid. I am focused. I am clear, I am cold, and I am unstoppable. Let them try. Let them all try. I will be waiting. I will be ready. And I will win. Again, and again, and again. Until the world learns. Until the world understands. Until the world respects. That is my goal. That is my mission. That is my life, and I will not stop until it is done. The rain has stopped. The streets are wet. They reflect the lights. They look like mirrors. I look in the rearview mirror. I see myself. I look tired. But I look strong. I look like someone who has been through the fire and came out clean. I smile. It is a small smile. It is a private smile. It is for me. I put the car in gear. I drive into the night. The city moves around me. The lights blur. The world spins. But I am steady. I am anchored. I am grounded. I know where I am going. I know who I am. I know what I want. And I will get it. Because I am not asking for permission. I am not waiting for approval. I am taking what is mine. And no one can stop me. No one can stop us. For every woman who has been told she is too much. For every woman who has been told she is not enough. For every woman who has been silenced. This is for you, this is for us. We are here, we are ready, and we are taking over. The boardrooms are ours, the tables are ours, the pens are ours, the future is ours. Take it. It is waiting. It is yours. Sign your name and never look back.